Hello and welcome to Mountaintop Media. I am so excited to be joined today by Frank, who is the president of Settlement Project. I was asked by the sweetest man, Jack, to come down and speak at their event in Southern California. And I was honored and humbled because I was able to speak with some of the most incredible individuals that I've ever met. And just absolutely starstruck to be on a panel of such wonderful women. And then when Frank got up to speak about what it is that the Settlement Project does and who they are and what their mission is, it completely flipped my entire day. And I took probably 3 pages of notes because we went there to speak on removing woke indoctrination from schools and what's happening with the woke agenda in our schools. And then we kind of flipped the perspective to what's happening with this woke ideology across our country. And it's so much bigger than I think any of us even um, had in our minds, right? So, everybody, I would like to introduce you to Frank Kaufmann, who is the president of Settlement Project. Frank, can you just say hi to the audience and tell them a little bit about you?
Sure. Hi, Frank here, as Leslie just described. And I've the Settlement Project, I founded that in 20 because the mass mail out of paper ballots looked like it was threatening what I thought we were on a good run in trying to get our country back on track. And so this was making me stressed. The inattention to what looked like bad election management. And so I became more obsessed with political affairs and social affairs than my customary way of life was. And in that juncture, I founded the Settlement Project. Prior to that, all my life, I have been an international peace negotiation leader, mostly on issues related to religion. So I negotiated between governments during the first Gulf War. I've negotiated between India and Pakistan during Muslim riots in the country back in there was a major incident in which people were getting killed, and we marched down between the rioters and the army. So my life has been basically international peace negotiations. And what had happened during the 2016 Trump administration, the country fell into a very rigid or calcified and fragile split. People were not able to talk to one another anymore. Families were breaking apart. People were unfriending lifelong friends and things. And that environment is the environment that I had lived to solve. When I work between warring parties, there's just dynamics that I obtain when people lose the capacity to to try to speak. And my own country had fallen into that. So I shifted across away from my lifelong, I mean decades long work of international peace negotiations. And it combined with two things: the breakdown of dialogue and conversation. I'm old enough so that after an election, people would go back to being Americans that suffered through the administration. They hated it, didn't like it. They were opposed, might even protest. Uh, all that's good, but we were all Americans. It's like a ball game. You win or lose. Bad luck, you lost this time, you win next time. That's how we lived as Americans. And this extreme breakdown was very hard on me, especially because I'm a I was a peace oriented guy. And that combined with just the massive artifice of the COVID lockdowns, the mass mailing of ballots and things like that. So I shifted away from what is often thought of as a kind of a liberal universe, right? Peace, international peacemakings, typical lefties, liberals, and uh, and so I shifted toward the American scene and try to get it to the bottom of the breakdown in our country. And so that's the founding of the settlement project. One of the things, stop me when I'm over what you've asked me to do.
No,
But
you're
anyway,
good. You're good.
okay. One of the things is that uh, typical peacemakers, and that's why you'll often find it's overpopulated with quote unquote liberals or progressives. Typical peacemakers think that people just need to love one another, just talk with one another, just get to know one another. That is a true dynamic in peacemaking. The other thing that no that and this is why you get progressives in there, they um, they would typically not imagine that anybody's right or wrong. And so unless the right people are wrong, like whites or males, or but but if you they can't spot right or wrong. And so the peace organization that I ran and still do, uh, if you're going to negotiate peace between warring factions, there is a side that's generally more right and generally more wrong. Nobody's perfect. Nobody has a monopoly. And so the settlement project, while its design is to create a harmonious America and to have people of every political stripe able to live together, work together, and converse together, there nevertheless is better circumstances than worse circumstances. A peaceful, orderly city where people pay for their groceries is generally a better city than one that has a $950 limit for shoplifting. So the Settlement Project is a curious mix of your classical pro dialogue, pro understanding, and yet doesn't shy away from the ideals of something being right or wrong. Something being right or wrong doesn't mean necessarily that people are good or bad. And that's another element in what we need to, how we, what's needed to get together. For your guests, now you can guess I'm in New York City. You can hear the sirens in the background. When I'm online, my friends always say, Frank, they're finally coming after you. They're finally coming to get you. So these sirens are a common part of my life. But there's a little bit of background. So the organization is very classically patriotic, very classically freedom, faith, and family. All the signs of a classically conservative, maybe MAGA, not Republican, I wouldn't say, but got to be in part for sure, organization. But but it's a mistake. At the end of the day, I mean, I've met a liberal or two with a decent idea or two, and so really they'll bring stuff to the table that we won't ordinarily think of, and so there are twin purposes there for the settlement project. The other thing
I
is,
love
I'm
it.
sorry, I'm talking too much, but the other
No, you're
thing is
good.
that
No, you're good.
there's populations that you would never know are your allies. Like like a lot of our friends will come to a conference like you came to, right? Uh, it's predominantly evangelical Christians or something like that. And then one of the speakers will be a Muslim American patriot with a spiel or a narrative that makes you cry for the love of America. And a lot of the people there have never met one, never been with one, don't under. And so the breadth of our meetings, which I think you may have experienced there, is another thing that is really an attractive part of the settlement project.
Right. And I think at the end of the meeting, you summed that up really well when you said, as long as you have a belief in a God or a deity, whatever that is, as long as you have a belief in creation, we're all on the same team, right? And so as long as, you know, we can agree to disagree on what that is in order to keep our country together,
Yeah,
but if we all come from the same understanding that it is faith, it is family, it is country. We're all on the same page, right?
Right. It's better that we work together. Even though we don't want to paper over stuff, we don't want to, we have our faith, we have our strong beliefs, but we're not going to water them down. But really, you have to keep your allies. I mean, it's foolish not to, especially in a war like the one we're in with
Right.
progressive seculars. Yeah.
Right. So, and I thought it was funny. I have actually been going back and reading some of the books. I have a collection of political books that I've been collecting over the years. And I've been going back and reading some of them to kind of give myself new talking points, learn a little bit more about our history. And they range from all over, right? But the one that I just finished reading recently was I Told You So by Rush Limbaugh.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
that was in the 90s. That was when Clinton was being installed as president. And if you look at what we're seeing now, it is 100% the work of what was started then, right? You say,
Mm,
um, in 2016 during Trump's presidency, we cracked, we fell apart, there was this great divide. But if you look at how it started and what happened, I mean, you go back and you look at that, and that's what started creating that division. There were talking points that said, you know, parents that are going to start getting overly involved are going to be a threat to our organized education system. People who want to get involved in government who are unqualified or normies are going to be a threat to our government because they don't know what they're doing. They're going to ask these questions, they're going to cause a divide, and they were starting to sow seeds of doubt, right? And that continued, right? We watched it happen.
yes.
um we were all kind of, I don't know even the right word, but like the wool was pulled over our eyes with Bush, thinking like he was doing all these great things. And then we go back and look, and he was working with all the same people all along, right?
Correct.
And so he was even pouring into that divide. Then we had Obama, and his wife says, I've never been proud to be an American until now that my husband's president. Why is the leader of our country not sold out 100%? This is the greatest country in the world.
Right. Yeah.
Instead, they're using these little things sowing doubt. And then Trump comes in and he's all of those things. He's questioning authority, he's shaking things up. And it causes a division and it causes a crack that I think so many of us are going to have a hard time recovering from.
Yeah.
But I was on
Yeah.
an airplane yesterday, no, 2 days ago now. My days are bleeding together. And I was sitting next to a woman and she said, what are you doing here? And I told her, and she's like, oh, well, we were here and we were kayaking. And I was like, that's awesome. She's like, I'm from DC. Where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from California. And she's like, oh. And she didn't respond like normal people do. Like when I say I'm from California and they're from another state, they're usually like, oh, I'm so sorry. Or, oh, how do you do it? Right? I'm sure you get the
Yeah.
same in New York,
Sure.
right?
Right. Right.
And so when she was like, oh, I was like, oh, okay, I know what I'm dealing with here, right? She lives in DC, she's not offended by California. And so I broke it to her gently because we had an hour to be on a plane together. And I
Yeah.
said, I work in politics, I'm a parental rights advocate, and this is what I do is I work in local government. And she was like dumbfounded. She's like, and you like that? And I'm like, yes, because what we need is we need to have normal people enter into government, ask questions, make it simple. Government has become complicated and complex so that it keeps us divided and so that we don't know what they're doing while they all pad their pocketbooks, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
become this evil thing that is not sustainable. So basically, what has happened is there's been this huge push, and they figured out that the greatest country in the world, America, functioning the way our founding fathers meant it to, is a threat to the one world order. It's a threat to, the push that they have that makes us equal to everybody else, global socialism, whatever it is that you want to call it. And so they had to start coming in and dividing us from within. And they had to start
Mm,
breaking us down. And what we didn't realize, and what I learned being at your conference, was that threat that's coming in is wokeism. And I always just thought that was just like one group of, no, it is a design. It is
yeah,
an ideology that has been fed to people who will absorb it, and they work as the mass army to carry it out. And I didn't understand that till you made the correlations. And maybe you can kind of explain to the audience a little bit what you did in your presentation, where you broke down the different falls in society, the different parts where a successful country or successful citizenship, I don't know, society, that's the word. A
mhm,
successful society starts to fall and crumble, and what and how each of those was tied back to an ideology. I'm stumbling all over it, but you did a great job describing it. And then you kind of went back from, I think you started at the French Revolution. Is that
yes,
correct? Or did you start?
right,
Okay, so you
yes,
started there and then you kind of worked your way to where we're at now.
yes.
Can you do that for our audience?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit on a
Okay.
very superficial level. And if we're ever together again,
Yes.
we can go deeper into it. But I guess the people of conscience and people of kind of patriotic spirit or basically grateful for the beauty of our country, the abundance of our country, and the diverse, like all the beauty of our country, um, they come across event after event or thought after thought or movement after movement that is kind of uh, incomprehensible, dumbfounded. We can't figure it out. Why would anybody want to do that to a country or to a university or to a family or to a child? Why would anybody or to a country? So um, so what I endeavored to make clear was that normal people of conscience and politically active people uh, will be kind of appalled or left speechless by any one given thing. Like how on earth can someone not figure out that if you don't have borders, it's trouble for a country? It doesn't, like some of my so there's entertaining videos, you may have seen them, where someone has someone sign, I'll do anything to maintain open and then they'll pull up a bus and have people say, okay, they're moving into your house, and the people come, they lock their door.
Yeah.
They're fun to watch, but it's basically it's basically not putting two thoughts together. you if it's obvious for your own house, how can one not spot that it's going to be trouble for a country? Or
Right.
similarly, so some people they'll be concerned about immigration policy, open borders, and things like. Another person with conscience, a person of conscience, a person conscientious or a patriot, will be concerned about obvious kind of gaping holes that you can drive a truck through in the possibility of free and fair elections. How can you not establish that this is who the person says they are, and that they're a citizen of the country where they're casting a vote for its leader? How on earth can you fight for having an election that is guaranteed to be rife with corruption? What makes someone push for that? What goes on there? And so I just listed a couple of things. Um, uh, in your work, what happens to young people, that what is it, drag queen story hour, or the
Mhm.
open advocacy of gender dysphoria and gender confusion, and and one is confused. How on earth is it possible? What's going on with the human being that is not uncomfortable with this. I don't know if you saw the video of a person at a school board meeting and had a couple of the people in the audience start to undress in they were wearing bathing suits, and the school board people freaked out and they were going to close down. And he goes, well, you're offended by this, but you don't imagine that a 9-year-old girl has trouble with a man undressing in her locker room. And so each of us are drawn to a particular dysfunction or a particular perversion, and we only have time to be invested in the fight to correct one or the other, or a couple at most. And so, one of the things that I tried to do in my presentation at our conference is to say that these are not a random collection of independent perversities and oddities. It's actually a single ideological groundwork that produces these by nature. Um, so there's cynicism. I mean, not cynicism. It's accurate observation that the open border was perpetrated in order to redraw congressional districts and to try to create a permanent Democrat ascendancy. Yeah, that's just practical, strategic, or something like that. But it's more than that. It's grounded in an ideological view. It's called critical the decolonization of the academy, decolonial thought. And so the view is that it grows out of the original Marxist um, um, view that private property is the source of all evil. And so if so America's one giant piece of private property. If you have a border and you say that not every single person who just wants to stroll through, it's a version or expression of private property. And so yes there is this ugliness of raw political corruption on the one hand, but what is not known by the people fighting that fight on the immigration policy is that its proponents are not just evil, cynical political animals. They actually believe that it's virtuous to not have a border in your country, and that people who want to preserve American sovereignty are actually oppressors, colonialists. They are the worst kind of people. They have no compassion. They have no love. And so as soon as you start to see the ideological basis of each and every single one of these phenomena, they're tied together. And then the warriors or the protectors or the people who are trying to preserve the beauty and opportunity of our country suddenly realize that it's not whack-a-mole. It's you just like what's great that's going on now is trace the money. That's a it
Right.
is getting to a single point. We are spotting a very small number of people who are perpetrating the efforts to destroy the United States. But this is kind of the ideological version of that. It's not only trace the money, it's trace the idea. And then you say, defund the police, no borders, the push of gender dysfunction in poor innocent young people. You start to see it's like trace the money. There it is, and that just as the money helps the protectors of a good American ideal, also the ideological tracing through the what used to be squid ink. I don't know where they're coming from. Now we see where they're coming
Mhm.
from. It's Singham, it's Soros, etc. And similarly, with the work that we do with settlement, and what you heard is something similar. It's tracing the idea. And you say, it's that idea. And now when you're standing in front of a school board person, you know more about how they come to their views than they do. It's actually,
Right.
you believe this, don't you? You actually believe um, that conforming to gender is a version of oppression, don't you? And and then they cease to be just a pure, cynical, power hungry. Because as soon as you get into those definitions, which are true, as soon as you get to that, um, then you're going to be flooded with examples. Well, what about the conservative mayor of Ohio? Didn't he do the same thing, or was it? Didn't he stock trade? Or but once you know that the idea is bad, then you can go toe to toe and start to win the battles and reestablish. Um, you're not trying to reestablish something bad. Anyway, so yeah, that's the first time I thought of it, but that's actually a good analogy. Trace like the money tracing, the idea tracing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it really is. I mean, and it disarms them, right? Because, like I said, as I'm flying and I'm talking to this woman, and she's like, well, I just think Trump is evil. And I'm like, okay, why? You know, you don't need to invite him to your house for dinner, but he's
Mm,
running the country. What about him is evil? And she's like, well, why do you like it? And I said, because as my parental rights are being stripped away by my state, and as the decisions for my own children are being taken away from me, he's standing with us, linking arms and saying, I'm going to protect the innocence of children. There's only two genders. Transitioning a child is child abuse. And he's standing with us on these issues that I wholeheartedly believe in. And she's like, oh, okay, well, what about RFK Jr. and all of his stuff with the vaccines? And what if, he has no knowledge and he's an idiot? And I'm like, okay, tell me how. Well, I agree with his Make America Healthy thing and the food dyes and I'm like, okay, so do you know what chemicals are in the vaccines? If you don't want to eat food dye in your M&Ms, but you're okay pumping who knows what into a tiny toddler, right? Like, tell me how that makes sense. And, why shouldn't that be a parent's choice? And I'm in no way, shape, or form an anti vaxxer to an extreme. But I also think that, you and my parents probably got, you know, 20 vaccines, maybe 15 vaccines, and you're completely healthy and you're completely covered. And, then me, I probably got somewhere between 30 and 40. Now we're pumping 70 to 85 vaccines into somebody under the age of 3. That's where I have an issue. Where I have an issue
mm,
is we're continuing to, enrich big pharma and we're not actually getting any healthier, right? We're not seeing any of the results. So, just like you said, it goes back to follow the money. Where are the results? Where are, in all the NGOs that are in government now? And, with the government shutdown that's happening right now, are there people that are going to be affected? Yes. Are there people who are working for free right now or are going through lean times but they'll get their check later? Yeah. And is that stressful? Absolutely. But are we also seeing an large, exorbitant amount of waste and fraud that we're going to be able to start rooting out and cutting out so that we can afford better healthcare for everybody, so we can afford better services for those who need it, right? Like, if we follow the money and we track the money, we're going to come to solutions that everybody can be happy with. The problem is they don't want us talking. They don't want us communicating. And, another thing that you said when you were speaking was war happens when there are enemies who seek to ravage a non-negotiable in our lives, right? So war happens when people are like, what you believe in is unacceptable. There's no middle ground. We're going to destroy it and nothing else is going to come of it. We're right, you're wrong, and there's no middle ground, right? And that's
yeah.
what's going to end up bringing us to a civil war. Is we have a side of the aisle who says all of these extremes are normal, all of these, and like you said, they've taken every rationale out, right? Well, there is no God.
Yes.
So that takes out having a moral society. That takes out having to answer for why something's right and wrong, right? So if there is no
Yes.
God, they don't have to answer for those things. And so then they've been trained to just want to wipe out an entire group, an entire portion of our our country. Well, it's going to destroy us because those people are going to they're going to hand everything over to the new Democrat Socialist Party that's coming in, and then they're going to be sold to China or whoever, you
Yeah,
know, and
yeah,
we're not going to have a country,
yeah,
right?
that's true. Yeah, that's true. I agree with you, Leslie, on that. Yeah. As you were
And
speaking, oh, go ahead, please.
oh, no, you're good. But I mean, I'm not saying all Democrats are evil. I'm not saying all Republicans are right because I love how you like stopped yourself and you were like, we are conservative. Maybe even our views are MAGA, probably not Republican. And I loved that because I'm seeing myself raised on Rush Limbaugh, staunch conservative, starting to say, I'm voting for an independent for governor. I'm, you know, pulling myself from the GOP. I'm not participating in these antics because the Republican Party's gotten the same way as the Democrat Party. It's all about money. It's all about control. It's all about making sure that we keep a bloated government and bureaucrats instead of the working people who should represent for the people, by the people, of the people, right?
Correct. Yeah,
And
exactly correct.
so I love
Yeah,
that you said that. I think we're on the same page there.
yeah, for sure. As you were speaking, it crossed my mind that when you were talking about universals underlying the discrete perversities or discrete malfunctions, one of the things is that for on the left, on the progressive or radical left, there's a basic assumption that established institutions, cause oppression. They don't think they cause order. They think they cause oppression. That's the starting point. And so, what by imagining themselves, like the lady who was sitting next to you on the plane, she sounded to me like a watcher of television. Like that's she sounded like a watcher of television, not a wealth, like just somebody that believes what they hear on TV. But the people who are actively trying to create platforms and trying to strategically put in place things that we regard as harmful, basically they believe that the state that reason can come up with how to organize things so there's no inequality. That's where their sense of virtue lies, and that's the slippery slope that eventually has you removing every evidence that keeps order, all the way down to your field is parental rights. So, one of the organizations that they believe is the beginning of the creation of inequality, of marginalization or marginalized or oppressed peoples or something like that, is family. The next thing
Right,
is church. Any institution which brings people into a place where they're not simple functionaries of the state, because
right,
the state is imagined to be that which will guarantee virtue, and their virtue is equality, or even worse, equity. I shouldn't say even
right,
worse. Equality is beautiful, equity is problematic. And
right,
so and so the philosophical origins of what eventually end up with why the progressive left or radical left loves the state so much. It it's kind of strange. It's like wait a minute. Uh, you're wildly liberal, so you're defending big pharma. I don't remember that from college. I didn't remember
right,
that the or defending war in Ukraine, or billions or tens of billions, hundreds of billions to Ukraine, and demanding armaments. And how did the progressive left become a caricature of its own origins, of its own protests?
right,
And that it comes from the starting point in which one imagines that my ideas are sufficient to create equality or equity, and so I
right,
need control in order to put my ideas in place. I'm so smart that I can organize matters in which no one will be treated unequally. And
Right.
so and given that I'm so smart that I've been able to figure that out, then of course I need power. I need the power to coerce. I need the power to deprive. And on top of which, the last thing I need is places where I can't get in and find out what people are thinking and talking about. So like freedom of religion or parental rights. I don't know what the parent might be teaching their child bigotry, of all things, bigotry.
Right.
So I can't afford to have parents educating the children because the parents might teach something other than my brilliant idea of how to make sure nobody's ever harmed or nobody's ever hurt. And that's where you get this bizarre paradox of what used to be the protesters used to be the hippies, and they still imagine themselves to be protesting, and yet they're demanding state authoritarianism. It's the most
Right.
ironic paradox. and
Isn't it
and
hilarious? They
yeah.
just had a No King's Day. Well, they've had a few of them, but they just had a No King's Day, and they're demanding that the government that tells them what to think, what to do, it's funded by like the top six funders of that are the
Right.
people who own everything,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
so it's hilarious, but they've been conditioned, right? If you look back at it, I used to say, being a parental rights advocate, caring about kids, I used to say, it takes a village. I have my tribe of people that I trust to be part of my kid's life, right? I grew up in a basketball gym. I always joke that I was the little girl from Remember the Titans, but in a basketball world instead of a football world. I knew every player, I knew every parent, and I'm in the stands screaming and yelling. And that whole um, community that raised me, being a small town and my parents working at the school, and that whole community that raised me. I have so much that I owe to so many people because
Right.
so many people poured into me. So I always used to say, it takes a village. Then I was saying that on one of my podcasts, and I'm rolling into another line of thought. And the person that I was talking to was like, Leslie, don't ever say that again. And I was like, but why? And they were like, yes, it takes your tribe, it takes a community, don't ever say it takes a village because that was coined in the 70s and 80s by the left. There was a democratic movement of it takes a village, but not the family. It takes a
Right.
village, but that village is the government. That village is the schools. That village is us, but not you, right?
That's right.
And they said
That's
that
right.
was the downfall. That whole message of it takes a village was the downfall to breaking down like everybody says the nuclear family, right? But I think it's more the biblical family, right?
It's
They
well
were
said.
breaking down what society deemed a normal family.
Yeah.
And your support system then didn't become the people you chose, it became the government who you now have to rely on. And then the government can't be wrong.
Yeah. 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 No, that's a very interesting hub that you hit upon, because the original notion of the function of the village was African, and which is one of the strongest family
Right.
community cultures on earth, and I believe it or not, even though I live here in Manhattan, in New York City, uh, people never believe it, but their neighbors have leaned out the window and yelled at my kids, "Why aren't you home yet?" Middle of New York. And to me there is that extent to which the village is a support for the family, but
Yeah.
the co-opting of it of the progressive left, and then kind of stolen and made permanently owned by Hillary. I think it was one of her books or one of her phrases or something like that, is that this was a design to undermine the family. Your children are not your own. And so
Right.
it's a lot. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem with the kind of rational, the hyper rational West, that you'll misunderstand the fundamental truths of things because it it really does take a village. Sometimes I can't be home in time, and my neighbor has my key, and they'll sit with my kids till I get back home. And yeah, it does take a village, but the village grows out of like what you said. Y- That's what the whole sovereignty that our founders gave us. It's always our choice, and our village is our choice. Not just because they live
Right.
nearby is not the ones who are there. My kids would be forbidden to hang with somebody, even though they might
Hmm.
be in the confines of the districting that would be called the village of
Right.
Jamestown, whatever, like that. So it originates with our God-given sovereignty, and then every successive social structure is what we
Right.
build out of either biblical guidelines or wherever we draw our surrendered virtue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, and I'm looking at my notes from when you spoke. You said, what is the nature of evil? Corruption and criminality and delusion and ideology, right?
Yes,
And
that's
that's what it is. When you make government corrupt or you make society corrupt and you introduce a criminal element, right? Then you have the answer in this delusional ideology of how we fix it while at the same time making the problem worse. I mean, I don't
yeah.
know that that's where you were going, but to me, it would just was like, that makes so much sense. It's like when Ronald
Mm.
Reagan said, I'm the government and I'm here to help. That should be the most scary thought that ever came to your mind.
Right,
You know,
right,
we broke
right.
it. We're the problem. Oh, wait, we're here to fix it.
You're right.
Like,
I agree with that
and
a
that's
thousand
what they've
percent.
done is we've created an entire movement where we're destroying ourselves from within. We
Yeah,
have this woke movement. And I say all the time, right? Staunch conservative, super right leaning, right? But it takes all sides. I need somebody who's going to call me and say, Leslie, do you really believe in the Constitution if you automatically assume that person's guilty? Right? I need
there you
somebody
go.
who's going to say they they deserve due process. They deserve their chance in court. You say you believe in the Constitution. And I have an attorney friend and he constantly has to hear that. Oh my goodness, they have 7 DUIs. What are they thinking? And why is that person still walking the streets? Well, Leslie, do you believe in the Constitution? Right? And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, you got me, right? And there's things that I'm going to fight for and there's hills I'm willing to die on, but I love plastic straws, right? I think that
Yeah.
the reusable thick ones that come with the cups are disgusting because I don't know that I can ever get them clean. So I love to go buy bulk plastic straws, use them and then throw them away. And so I need somebody who is going to care about that part of society that it's not my focus, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it takes both sides. It
Yeah. That's
truly
right.
does.
That's right.
But what is dangerous is we have an ideology that has crept in and has taken over almost an entire side of government. And out of that, we're seeing, somebody like you who says you worked your entire life in a predominantly left leaning industry,
Industry.
right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have General Flynn, who was a lifelong Democrat, who is now like the leader of MAGA. You now have, Tulsi Gabbard, who was born, raised, and grew up in Democrat thinking and leaning and Hawaii is extremely
Right.
liberal and
Wildly
extremely
liberal.
democratic, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's leading the free world as a staunch conservative, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're seeing these people come over and it's because they're breaking away not from the party but from the woke ideology that's taken over their party.
Yeah. It's true. It's
And
true.
so you guys nailed it when you said what it is we need to fight against is not each other, but it's about breaking down and destroying this ideology that's creeping in, and it's going to destroy our society in the same way that the French Revolution destroyed their society, in the same way that, the
The
Nazis came in and were able
Marxism.
to destroy that society, right? We've
Yeah,
seen it happen over and over and over, where it's a thought, it's an ideology that comes in and it completely destroys civilization.
yeah,
And we're next.
yeah. It's really true. Yeah, that's really true. That is the urgency of my side. My particular focus is that what begins as philosophy shifts to ideology when it becomes implemented by state force, uh, ever increasing numbers of genocide happen. So French Revolution was hundreds of thousands. Marxist Revolution was maybe 100 million. And if woke ideology or its postmodern critical theory, if that becomes ideology, wokeism, that becomes politically implemented, there will be uh, a loss of life that dwarfs what the Marxists were able to do. And we hear it openly. We hear it openly. You go to a WEF meeting or they'll talk about that the earth can only sustain 2 billion people. And so, I mean, it's an implicit suggestion that there's just people, billions of people that are the enemy, the enemy of life
Yeah.
on Earth. So the danger is whenever it gets into power, the amount of carnage is overwhelming, and so that's the urgency of my work is making the ideology clear so that it can be challenged and overcome. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's so amazing because I'm like looking at my notes and everything you were saying is following everything I was writing down. And I love it because I'm like,
Oh,
good, I got
good.
all the good nuggets. I got
Very
all the
good. Yeah, I'm very
so
moved,
to
Leslie, when I was speaking, I was grateful for your attentiveness. It moved me really because I really felt a guest of you guys who are doing the hard work. So yeah,
oh well, thank you. I
yeah,
really I knew there was a reason, right? That I came. Everything happens for a reason. Everything has a purpose. Everything that was going on in my individual life, my social life, and then everything that had happened that week with Charlie, I was looking for every reason not to attend. Right? I was just
yeah,
like, I'm coming from the top of the state to the bottom of the state for what? I don't even know what I'm doing. And then I'm looking at the panelists and I'm like, I have Mary Barkey, who's doing all this stuff with Clio and with California Policy Center.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
got, Sonia Shaw, who is running for superintendent of schools. Like, why do I even need to share a stage with these people? Like, they can say and do so much more than I can ever imagine. And then, like, I heard you speak, and I was like, this ties together everything that I'm fighting for. And I knew there
mm,
was a reason that I was there, right? And
good,
so
good,
I was humbled by it. I was so happy to be thought of and be involved, and and Jack did an amazing job making sure that we all did commit. We all continued to commit. He's followed up all the way up. And then he did a great job of making sure that we all felt very appreciated afterwards.
yeah, yeah,
So I
very
thought that
good,
was great.
very
Um,
good.
so to wrap up, because I would definitely love to have you back, dive deeper into some of these, but to wrap up, um, you talked about how to combat this ideology that's being implemented, right? Because that's the step that we're at now. We've
Yeah,
have philosophy that became ideology. We have ideology that's now being implemented. Once the implementation happens, that's where it leads to loss of life. So how do we fight back? How do we combat that? And you said that the basis for renewal would be the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, right?
yes, yes,
Um, and there were um, we have to acknowledge and understand that there is a creator. Whoever or whatever that is
Yeah,
irrelevant, because if someone believes in a creator, we must consider them an ally. Because so much of this woke ideology, or this
right.
critical
Yes.
thought, is that there is no creator, nothing exists,
Critical
so
theory. Yeah.
therefore there's
Uh-huh.
no
Yes.
reason, right? So
Yes.
so we must consider them an ally, right? And so that's step one. There is a creator. Humans have an identity from God, right? Because if we have an
Yeah.
identity, we know who we are, we know what is good, bad, how we can fight it, how do we move forward. And then you said identity has four parts. We are free, we are equal. What were the last two?
Oh, oh, we have a purpose. We're created for a reason. And I can't remember what was the fourth. I should I should, but if I can jump in on the fighting back,
Yeah,
um, basically, America was, to me, the insights of the framers captured captured all the progress of human history up to that point. Basically, they founded and organized a system of governance that 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 captured all the progress humanity had made until then. And what they recognized was that we're created by God to be free to pursue happiness and with unalienable rights. Those three things are fine in an era where one presumes that a religious framework is natural, which it was at the time, and what presumes that families are natural, which existed at the time. So they don't need to go any further than to insist upon each individual being absolutely sovereign, absolutely free, and absolutely uh, correct in the pursuit of their happiness. If you take away, if in the progress of philosophical perversion, that the family is not regarded as the normal guide rails for life, but rather the source of evil, where bigotry is introduced or biases are introduced, or uh, so the family has been completely broken down as an assumption of how life should be. And then religion broke down as an assumption of how life should be. The decline in church attendance, and only an idiot would believe that the earth is made in 7 days is mocked, and things like that, which no, which most Christians would never say such a thing anyway. But there's a mockery of religion. So
right,
under current circumstance, oh, and so I said that two things need to augment what the founders introduced. These three things: sovereignty, freedom, God-given rights, and the right to pursue happiness. They, they, we are currently in the need to augment those because we are no longer in a social framework that takes for granted family and takes for granted religious life, religious spiritual life. We live in a secular era. People believe everything can be solved by their phone. They don't believe that they'll ever need to depend on God as long as they have their phone. And so what
right,
I said was, what's needed in order for the righteous to carry the fight to the secularists and to the state totalitarian state people is that Christianity, as a primary religious force in America, needs to have needs to intensify its advocacy of family life. I think we fell down on the job on that. We didn't go against family, but it wasn't a prime voice of Christian life. And I think Charlie and Erica are they're kind of the lead force. I was so moved because this I arrived at this kind of philosophically in a way, and then to see this in flesh and blood of those two people that just said marry, have children, and they said it as Christians because we're Christians, and that had not been part of the Christian definition. And I believe that somehow integrating Christian life or Jewish life or whichever is your religious faith to saying that this faith requires the affirmation of this God created structure of life, of love and life.
Right.
And then the second thing I mentioned in terms of how we fight the fight is that the way America was founded was that the Christians who had been the 30 Years' War in Christianity between 1600 1630, the only reason why it ended is there were no more people left to kill. It was Protestant versus Catholic, and they ran out of people to kill. They just fell down exhausted. There was nothing, no one was capable of any more war. They had it was like they without collapsed and could not pick up another spear or another stone. And those very same people came to America. And how come they don't hate each other here? What happened here? What happened here? Somehow or another, Christians of every stripe and Jews, a couple of Muslims, but who had been killing each other to to the to the end of to exhaustion, came to America and formed a common Christendom in the name of the ideal of our country. And so what my second point was that now America in the interim, in the intervening years, has come to absorb every people of every religion imaginable. We're all here now. So that very same magic or spirit or unimaginable thing that happened at our founding, how on earth did those Christians manage to work to believe themselves as one enough? Like Protestants, they said, "Are you?" They used to say, "Are you Christian or are you Catholic?" Have you ever heard are you Christian or are you Catholic? It's like what? It's
Right.
like the yeah. So that's we need the next leap. We need to be able to do that one more time somehow or another. And if we think, no, 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 Jesus is the only way, and I can't possibly, no matter how much the Hindus seem like nice people, I can't possibly talk to them or consider them religious. And my thought is, you could not drum up more hate for a Hindu than a Protestant had for a Catholic in the 30
Right.
Years' War. So you have less work to do. We have less work to do. So my two advocacies are since since the environment of our founding has shifted, not our founding, they got it exactly right. Sovereign, free, equal, God-given rights. Those are perfectly good enough. We what happened was the environment shifted around us, and so we need to do one more thing one more time. That same ecumenical thing that the American revolutionaries managed to fight side by side, and and to be overt in the affirmation of family, which came for free at the time of the founders' work. They didn't have to
Right.
argue for it. So we have to build it by deliberately.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's perfect and that's beautiful and that's exactly what Charlie was doing and living out
Yeah.
was we need to be a moral society that believes that Christ died for our sins and nothing else matters, right? And we
Right.
need to raise strong families. We need to get married and have children and have a strong biblical family, not
Right.
nuclear family, not whatever you want it to look like, biblical family, right?
Yeah,
And so if we have those revolutions in our country where people are saying, this is my status quo and I'm not settling for less,
yeah,
we can save our country and we can overcome what we're doing,
yeah.
where
He
we're
was
headed.
saving our country. He was saving our country by speaking to the young people. Uh, and it was odd. I mean, you, any Christian has to confess when he was saying, get married, have children. It wasn't, there wasn't, you don't hear that in every church all the time. He was
Right.
pioneering. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that was amazing. All
yeah.
right. Well, thank you for coming on. It's so easy. I feel like we could just go for hours. I definitely want to
Good,
have you back.
good. Yeah, I'd love to. I love this and I love being with you. So if there's a spot or a slot, please let me know. I'd love to keep going with this.
I would love it. I will definitely. I'll be in touch to come back. And if you have something that you ever need me, I mean, again, I don't know how I ended up on that stage. I felt I had no business to be there, but I was happy to be a part of it. So if
You're a
something ever
great
comes
though.
up again, let me know. I
Okay.
would be enjoy having any part in what you guys are doing and pushing across our country. I think it's great.
Thanks, Leslie. Thank you very much. And you will be for sure. We'll be in touch
That
very
would be
soon,
great.
I'm sure. Yeah, yeah.
That would be
All
great. So
right.
where can people find you if they're interested in learning more? What's your website?
SP12.org. The letter S, the letter P, Settlement Project. SP, the numerals 1, 2, SP12.org.
Perfect. Thank you. All
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks for
right.
having me. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.